Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Easy English Spark channel. I'm so thrilled to have you here today. I hope you're ready for an exciting journey where we'll not only enhance your English listening and speaking skills, but also help you feel more confident and fluent with every lesson. Today, we're diving into a simple yet powerful story about love, strength, and letting go. Just like building a house, one step at a time. Let's get started and spark your English learning journey. Chapter 1. A Simple Life. You know, I used to think life was simple. I mean, really simple. Everything had a place, and I thought I had everything under control. There was a rhythm to my days. I woke up in the morning, went through my routine, and everything felt predictable. There was comfort in that predictability. I had my job, my friends, and my little apartment. Nothing too fancy, but enough. Enough for me to feel like I was on the right track. I didn't need anything else, right? I had always been someone who liked order. I liked having a plan, knowing what was next. If something went off course, I'd adjust, but I always kept things within my control. My life was like a well-organized calendar. I would tick off the boxes one by one every single day. And when you live like that, you start to believe that this is what life is all about. Following the plan, day after day. Simple. But then, one afternoon, everything changed. It wasn't anything dramatic. No sudden events or shocking revelations. It was something quiet. Something subtle. I was sitting at a small cafe, just having a cup of coffee, the rain falling softly outside. I loved days like these. Quiet. Calm. Nothing out of the ordinary. The sound of the rain tapping against the windows, the hum of quiet conversations around me, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee in the air. It was like the world had slowed down, and for a moment, everything felt just right. That's when I saw him. He was sitting across the room, alone at a table by the window. I noticed him right away, not because he was doing anything particularly special, but because there was something about him that made me look twice. He had a kind of presence, something you can't quite explain, but you feel it in your gut. He wasn't doing anything out of the ordinary. He was simply reading a book, sipping his coffee like everyone else around us. But there was this quiet energy around him, something magnetic. I tried to ignore the strange pull I felt in my chest, but I couldn't. It wasn't like anything I'd felt before. It was subtle, yet it was there, and it was undeniable. I didn't know who he was, but there was this feeling that maybe, just maybe, I knew him in some way. as though our paths had crossed long before that moment, like I was meant to see him, to meet him, on that rainy afternoon. I tried to push it away. I thought, what am I thinking? He's just some stranger in a cafe. But I couldn't shake the thought. It was as if something in the universe was telling me that this was no ordinary day, that my life was about to change, and I had no idea how or why. I watched him for a few more moments, feeling a strange sense of recognition. It wasn't like I knew his face. It wasn't like I had seen him somewhere before. It was more like I had known him for years. Like we were somehow tied together by something invisible, something I couldn't quite understand, but I felt it deep inside. Eventually, I couldn't just sit there anymore, lost in my own thoughts. I had to do something. It wasn't like me to act on impulse, but this felt different. I stood up, walked across the cafe, and before I knew it, I was standing right there in front of him. He looked up at me, surprised at first, but then his expression softened, and that's when I saw it. His smile. It was warm, genuine, and it made my heart do something funny. I hadn't expected that smile. I hadn't expected to feel the way I did in that moment. "Hi," I said, my voice sounding different, softer than I had anticipated. It was almost like I was searching for something that would make sense of the strange feeling I had. He looked at me for a moment, studying me with curiosity, then responded with a smile that seemed to say, "It's okay. You're not the only one who feels like this." His voice was calm and soothing, like the kind of voice you could listen to for hours. It was like the kind of conversation you always wanted to have but never had the courage to start. And so, there we were. Two strangers meeting for the first time in the most unexpected way. And in that moment, nothing felt simple anymore. The life I had so carefully planned, the predictable routine I thought I understood, all of it suddenly seemed small, like a tiny piece of a much larger puzzle that I had no idea was out there, waiting for me to find it. And it was all because of one simple, quiet afternoon, one stranger sitting across the room, and one smile that felt like home. Chapter 2. The First Encounter. There are moments in life that you don't expect to change everything, but they do. The kind of moments that happen so casually, yet they feel like turning points. And for me, that moment happened on an ordinary afternoon at a small cafe. The kind of place where you go to escape the noise, to lose yourself in a book or a cup of coffee. It was the kind of place that made me feel comfortable, like time could slow down. and the world could feel still for a moment. The rain was falling lightly outside, casting a soft mist across the windows. I was sitting by the window, watching. The droplets race each other down the glass when I noticed him. At first it was nothing, just a guy sitting alone at a table across the room, flipping through a book. But something about him caught my attention. Something in the way he was, lost in his own world. His focus, the way he gently adjusted his glasses, the way he seemed completely at ease in his own space. It was simple, yet it intrigued me. I tried not to stare, of course. After all, he was just another person in the cafe, right? But the more I tried to look away, the more I found myself drawn to him. It wasn't like I knew him or even recognized him from anywhere. It was more like I felt something. A connection, maybe. A pull. A curiosity that I couldn't shake. He was just so different from everyone else around me. As I sat there, lost in my thoughts, I couldn't help but wonder about him. Who was he? What was he reading so intently? Was he like me? Someone who found solace in the quiet moments? Or was there something else beneath the surface? Maybe I had it all wrong. Maybe I was reading into things too much. After all, I didn't even know his name. But the more I tried to ignore him, the more I found my eyes returning to his table. And that's when he looked up. I froze for a second, caught in the act of staring. I'm sure my face turned a little red, but I didn't look away. Instead, I held his gaze for a beat longer than I probably should have. And that's when it happened. He smiled. It wasn't a huge smile. It wasn't the kind of smile that could light up a room, but it was warm, genuine. And it hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. It was the kind of smile that made me feel like everything I had been thinking about, everything I had been wondering, somehow didn't matter anymore. That smile told me something I hadn't expected. He knew what I was thinking. He smiled again, this time just a little wider, and I could feel my heart race. It was an invitation, an acknowledgement that we were both aware of the unspoken connection between us. It was as though in that fleeting moment we had shared something brief, but something real. "Hi," I said before I even realized I had opened my mouth. I hadn't meant to say anything, but there I was, standing, with my feet planted firmly on the ground in front of his table. I'm not usually one to make the first move, but something about him made me feel like I had to. I had to at least say something, do something to acknowledge this strange pull. His eyes softened, and for a moment, he seemed a little surprised, It was almost as if he wasn't expecting anyone to speak to him, or maybe he was just surprised by the suddenness of it all. But then his expression changed, and that's when he spoke. "Hello?" he said, his voice calm and warm, the kind of voice that immediately put me at ease. "I didn't expect to be interrupted, but I'm glad you did." There was a slight chuckle in his voice, a lightness that helped break the tension. I wasn't sure what to say next, but something told me I shouldn't overthink it. He had already made me feel welcome, in a way, just by being himself. So I decided to sit down, right across from him. We exchanged a few awkward words at first, like two strangers trying to make sense of this unexpected moment. But the more we talked, the easier it became. We found ourselves discussing books, our favorite authors, the things we loved about rainy days, and how they made us feel less alone in the world. His thoughts were insightful, and I could tell he wasn't just talking to fill the silence. He was genuine. Everything he said seemed to come from a place of sincerity, and it made me want to know more about him. For the next hour, we didn't talk about anything particularly important. We spoke about random things, small things, and yet it felt like the most significant conversation I had had in a long time. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he listened, the way he made me feel heard, like I mattered, like what I had to say was important. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't expected. Life wasn't just about going through the motions, about following the plan. It wasn't just about getting from one day to the next. It was about moments like this. Unpredictable, spontaneous moments that come out of nowhere and change everything. This was one of those moments. The kind that leaves you wondering how you ever thought life was simple. He stood up to leave, and for a second I was sure I hadn't seen him for the last time. There was a quiet confidence in the way he walked, as though he knew we would meet again. "Maybe I'll see you again?" I asked, almost nervously. "I'd like that," he replied with that same warm smile. And with that, he walked out of the cafe, leaving me standing there, a little breathless, a little confused, but mostly excited. And as I sat there, staring at the empty seat across from me, I couldn't help but think. I had no idea where this was going, but I knew one thing for sure. Nothing in my life was going to feel the same after this. Chapter 3: A Growing Connection. After that first encounter, everything changed in ways I never could have expected. It wasn't like I had planned for it to happen, or that I had some grand idea of what would come next. But somehow, over time, a connection began to form between us, something so subtle, but also undeniable. And it all started with those quiet moments together at the cafe. You see, at first, we didn't talk about anything too deep. We didn't dive into personal histories or explore the kind of topics that might make two people feel exposed or vulnerable. No, we kept things light. It was just about two people sitting together, enjoying each other's company, exchanging small stories about books, music, or even what kind of coffee we liked best. It was casual, easy, and most importantly, it was comfortable. It was like we had known each other for years, even though we had only met a few times. But as the days went on, something changed. What started as simple pleasantries began to grow into something more. The more we talked, the more I realized how much I enjoyed his company. Lucas, as I had come to know him, was not like anyone I had met before. He had this quiet intensity about him, a way of paying attention to the little details, to the things that most people would overlook. He wasn't the type to boast about his achievements or flaunt his successes. Instead, he listened, really listened, and in that I found something rare. It wasn't just the way he talked, though. It was the way he made me feel when he was around. When we were together, it was like the world slowed down. The noise from the outside faded away, and it was just the two of us in this little bubble of calm. I hadn't realized it at first, but his presence had become something I craved. I started looking forward to our conversations, to the way the air felt lighter when he was near. One day I remember him telling me about his love for old jazz music. "There's something about it," he said, his voice soft but passionate. "The way the notes seem to speak to you, not in words, but in feelings. It's like the music understands the things you can't say out loud." I could see the way his eyes lit up when he talked about it, as if jazz was more than just a genre to him. It was a part of him, a part of the way he experienced the world. I smiled, intrigued by how deeply he connected to something so simple, something many people might overlook. "I've never really listened to jazz," I admitted, feeling a little embarrassed. "Maybe I should give it a try." He grinned, a little mischievously. "I'll make you a playlist. Trust me, you'll love it." And that was the kind of person Lucas was. He wasn't just offering me music. He was offering me a piece of himself. I realized then that he didn't just talk about things. He shared pieces of his life, his passions, his thoughts in a way that made you feel like you were stepping into his world, even for just a moment. As the weeks passed, our meetings at the cafe became a routine. We would sit for hours, just talking about anything and everything. sometimes saying nothing at all. And even in the silence, it felt like we were still communicating. There was a comfort in just being there, in knowing that the other person understood without needing to say much. It was like we were speaking a language that only we understood, one that didn't require words to make sense. I remember one afternoon as we sat at our usual corner table, Lucas looked at me with this kind of intensity, as though he was weighing something in his mind. It was subtle, but I noticed it. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been thinking a lot about connections lately. The ones that are easy and the ones that are harder to find." He paused, looking down at his coffee, stirring it absently. "It's funny, isn't it? How the best connections seem to come when you least expect them, like they just happen out of nowhere." I wasn't sure what to say to that. The air between us shifted, and I felt something stir within me. Was he talking about us? Was he saying that what we were building, was something unexpected? Something special? Before I could say anything, he continued, his voice more tentative now. "I mean, it's not like I'm complaining. I like this. I like being here with you." He looked up at me, his eyes searching mine, as if trying to see if I felt the same way. In that moment, I realized how much I had come to appreciate him, how much I looked forward to seeing him, to hearing his thoughts, to being near him. And I knew then that it wasn't just a passing connection. This wasn't something fleeting or casual. There was something deeper forming between us, something that felt both exciting and a little scary. "I like it too," I said softly, feeling my heart race just a little. I didn't expect this, but I'm glad it happened. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. In fact, it felt right. It was as though we had both acknowledged something without having to put it into words. We didn't need to define it just yet. We didn't need to rush into anything. All that mattered was that we were there, together, and something was growing between us. Something real. That afternoon marked a shift. We didn't need to force anything. We didn't need to have long, deep conversations about where this was going. We both knew that sometimes the best connections are the ones that don't need to be explained. They just are. From that point on, every meeting felt a little different. It wasn't just about casual chats anymore. It was about sharing moments, sharing thoughts, and realizing that maybe, just maybe, we were on the edge of something far more meaningful than either of us had anticipated. And I couldn't help but feel like what we had, wasn't something that happened every day. It wasn't something I had planned or expected, but it was something I wanted to hold on to, something I wanted to see where it would go. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, I was excited to find out. Chapter 4: Unspoken Pain. There's something about getting close to someone, about allowing yourself to be seen by them, that can make you feel exposed, vulnerable. It's like there's this invisible thread that connects you, but sometimes that thread reveals things you didn't even know you were hiding. And with Lucas, I started to realize that there was more to him than what met the eye. There was a quiet sadness behind his calm demeanor, something he hadn't fully shared yet. I could feel it, even though he didn't say anything. It was the kind of pain that wasn't obvious, but it was there, just beneath the surface. For a while, our conversations stayed light. We talked about music, books, dreams, and all the little things that made us laugh or smile. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when I'd catch him looking out the window, lost in thought, or staring into his cup of coffee like it held all the answers. I knew he was thinking about something, but he never spoke about it. He didn't need to, but I could feel it, the weight of it. And sometimes, in the quietest moments, I wondered if he was carrying it alone. I didn't push him. I wasn't sure how to. How do you ask someone to share something they've clearly been holding inside for so long? How do you break the silence when it's wrapped in something so delicate, so fragile, that the slightest touch might cause it to break apart? But one evening, as we sat at our usual table in the cafe, something shifted. The cafe was quiet, just the sound of clinking cups and soft chatter in the background. The rain was falling again, tapping gently against the window, but this time the air felt different. It wasn't just the weather, it was the way Lucas was sitting. His posture was different, and for the first time, he wasn't smiling. He wasn't lost in his usual thoughts either. He seemed distant, like a part of him had drifted somewhere far away, and I didn't know how to bring him back. "Lucas?" I said softly, my voice tentative, unsure of whether I should intrude on whatever was going on in his mind. He didn't look up at first, and for a moment, I thought he hadn't heard me. But then, slowly, his eyes met mine, and there was something in them that made my heart tighten. It wasn't the usual calm I was used to seeing. It was something darker, something harder to place. And for the first time, I saw the cracks in his mask. He exhaled deeply, a sound so heavy it made me wince. "I'm fine," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. It was more like a reflex, a habit he had formed to say that he was okay even when he wasn't. I could tell he was lying. I could tell he wasn't fine. But I didn't push. I didn't know how to. But he wasn't done. After a long pause, he looked down at his hands, fiddling with his coffee cup, as if trying to gather his thoughts. I just don't talk about it," he said quietly, almost to himself. It was as though he had said the words without meaning to, as though they had slipped out in a moment of weakness. I didn't say anything at first. I just let the silence hang between us, giving him space to breathe, to find his words. I didn't want to rush him, didn't want to force him to share something he wasn't ready to. But I could feel the weight of it, the sadness, the grief, whatever it was that was eating away at him. It was there, and it wasn't going anywhere. Eventually, Lucas spoke again, his voice softer now. "It's just, sometimes it feels like the world has moved on, and I'm still stuck in this place. Like I'm not really living, not really moving forward." He paused, and for a moment I thought he was going to stop talking. But then his eyes lifted to meet mine, and there was an openness there I hadn't seen before. I lost someone who meant the world to me, and I'm still trying to figure out how to live without them. My heart stopped for a moment, and I could feel the pain in his words, even though he hadn't said everything. It wasn't just about loss, it was about the silence that came with it. The kind of pain that didn't ask for attention but wore you down slowly, quietly, until you didn't even know how to breathe without it. And I could feel that in Lucas, the heaviness of the past that he carried around like a shadow. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, as if the words could somehow take away the weight he was carrying. He shook his head, his lips curling into a faint smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "It's not your fault," he replied, his voice distant again. "It's just something I have to deal with." I wanted to say more, to tell him that he didn't have to do it alone, that I was here, that I would listen. But the words got stuck in my throat. I wasn't sure what I could say. Sometimes there are no words for the kind of pain that sits quietly in the corners of your heart, waiting for the right moment to surface. And it felt like Lucas had been carrying that pain for a long time. Too long, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. I didn't know if anyone could. He looked down again, his hands resting on the table, the light from the window casting shadows across his face. There was a quiet sadness in him, one that seemed to come from deep within. And in that moment, I understood something that I hadn't before. People don't always talk about their pain because they don't want you to fix it. They don't want to burden anyone with their grief. Sometimes they just need to be seen, to be understood without needing to explain everything. I sat there quietly, waiting with him, not asking any more questions, not pushing him to share more than he was ready. Sometimes just being there is enough. And as we sat together, the rain falling outside and the world moving on around us, I realized that this was part of the connection we were building. It wasn't just about the good moments, the easy conversations. It was also about the silent moments, the times when you could feel someone's pain without them saying a word. It was about being there, even when you didn't have the answers. And for the first time, I understood what it meant to truly be present with someone, whether they were ready to speak or not. Chapter 5. The Absence. I had gotten used to seeing Lucas. His presence had become a part of my daily life, a comforting routine I hadn't realized I depended on. Every few days we'd meet at the cafe, share a cup of coffee, talk about the mundane and the meaningful, and leave with a sense of quiet connection that neither of us needed to put into words. It was simple, but it was everything to me. And somewhere along the way, I started to feel like I was looking forward to seeing him more than anything else. But then, one day, he didn't show up. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that always made me want to settle in with a warm drink and just watch the world go by. I had arrived early, as usual, and ordered my coffee, settling into my usual seat by the window. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, things happen. People get caught up in work or life or something else that prevents them from showing up. So, I waited and waited. The minutes stretched on, and Lucas still hadn't arrived. I glanced at the clock, then back out the window, watching the raindrops trace patterns across the glass. It wasn't like him to be late, not in all the time I'd known him. He was punctual, dependable, always made sure to be there when he said he would. So why hadn't he shown up? My mind began to race, trying to come up with logical explanations. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I told myself I was overthinking it. I tried to brush off the nagging feeling that had settled in my chest. But as the minutes ticked by and there was still no sign of him, that feeling began to grow, turning into a quiet, growing worry. I told myself that maybe he was busy, that maybe something had come up at the last minute. But it didn't stop the unease in my gut. The longer I sat there, the more I started to wonder if he was avoiding me. I couldn't quite explain why, but his absence made the cafe feel emptier, quieter. The once comforting sound of clinking cups and quiet conversations now felt hollow. Even the rain tapping against the windows seemed more distant somehow. I glanced at the door once more, hoping to see him walking in with that warm, easy smile of his. But no. The door stayed closed. Days passed. I didn't hear from him. I didn't know what to think anymore. I kept waiting, kept hoping that he would show up again, just like before. But as the days turned into a week, and still no word from Lucas, that hope started to feel more like a distant memory, something that was slipping further and further away. I began to feel a strange emptiness. It was like something was missing and I couldn't figure out what. It wasn't like we had been inseparable, but there was a quiet comfort in knowing that I could count on our regular meetups, on those stolen moments of connection. Without them, everything felt a little off. And yet, I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know how to reach out without feeling like I was overstepping, like maybe he just needed space. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it than that, something he wasn't telling me. A part of me wanted to pick up the phone and call him, but the fear of bothering him, of intruding on whatever it was that had caused him to pull away, held me back. I didn't want to make things worse, whatever the situation was, but as the days dragged on, the uncertainty gnawed at me, and I started to realize that I couldn't just wait around forever. If I truly wanted to understand what was going on, I needed to take the step that I had been avoiding. I decided to send him a message. It was a simple text, nothing dramatic, just a message saying, "Hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. I hope everything's okay." It felt strange typing it out, and even stranger hitting send. It wasn't the kind of thing I usually did. I didn't want to come across as too eager or pushy, but I couldn't just keep pretending like everything was fine. I waited. I stared at my phone, willing it to light up with a response, but there was nothing, not for hours. And then, when I was just starting to lose hope, my phone buzzed. I hurriedly unlocked it, my heart racing. It was from him. My hands shook a little as I read the message. "Selena, I'm sorry. I've just been dealing with some things and needed time to myself. I didn't mean to worry you. I'll explain soon, I promise." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. On one hand, I was relieved to hear from him, to know that he hadn't just disappeared, that he was still out there. But on the other hand, there was a weight to his message, an unspoken pain that echoed between the lines. Whatever he was going through, it wasn't something he was ready to share with me. Not yet. I didn't know what to say in response. I wanted to ask him what was going on, to tell him that I was there for him, that he didn't have to go through whatever this was alone. But I also knew that if he wasn't ready to open up, pushing him to do so would only make things worse. So I decided to give him the space he needed. But I also made a promise to myself that I wouldn't just sit back and wait forever. I couldn't. I cared too much about him, about the connection we had begun to build. But that didn't make the waiting any easier. The absence of his presence was like a void in my life that I couldn't fill. It wasn't just about the moments we shared in the cafe. It was about the little things. The way he made me feel when he listened. The way his quiet smile made everything seem just a little bit brighter. Without that, everything felt dimmer, emptier. I kept hoping that he would come back, that whatever had pulled him away would pass, and he would return, ready to pick up where we had left off. But as the days went on, I couldn't shake the fear that maybe he wasn't coming back, or if he did, it wouldn't be the same. For the first time, I realized how much I had come to rely on him, on us, and how fragile that connection really was. Life doesn't always play out the way you expect. Sometimes people disappear, not because they want to, but because they're carrying something heavy inside them that they don't know how to share. And all you can do is wait and hope, and let them know that you're still there, even if they're not ready to reach out yet. And so, I waited. I waited, not knowing what the future would hold, but hoping that one day Lucas would come back, and that when he did, we would be able to face whatever he was going through together. Chapter 6. Lucas' Illness. The days after Lucas's disappearance felt like an eternity. It was as if the world had slowed down, and I was stuck in this endless limbo of waiting, wondering, and worrying. I didn't hear from him for days, and each time my phone buzzed, my heart would race in the hopes that it was him. But each time, it wasn't. Each day I checked my messages, checked my phone, and every time I felt that pang of disappointment when there was no response. I tried not to obsess over it. I tried to tell myself that maybe he just needed time, that he was dealing with something personal and didn't want to talk about it yet. But the silence was unbearable. The absence of him in my life was like a void that I couldn't fill, and I was struggling to stay patient. It felt like every moment without him was a reminder that something was missing, something important. And still, I kept waiting, hoping. Then, one afternoon, out of the blue, I received a message. The notification on my phone blinked, and when I opened it, my breath caught in my chest. It was from Lucas. I hadn't expected to hear from him, not like this. The message was short, but it left me with a heavy heart and a growing sense of concern. Selena, I need to tell you something. I've been sick. I didn't want to worry you, but I can't keep it from you anymore. I'll explain everything soon. Please don't be angry. My hand shook as I read the words. Sick? What did he mean? How sick? I didn't know what to feel, what to think. I had assumed when he had stopped showing up that maybe he was going through something personal, something difficult, but I hadn't imagined that it could be something this serious. Without thinking, I quickly typed back, asking him if he was okay, telling him that I was there for him and that I needed to know more. I didn't want to overwhelm him, but I couldn't stop myself. The fear, the worry, it was all bubbling up inside me. I had to know if he was okay. I had to understand what was going on. But Lucas's response didn't come immediately. The silence after my message was deafening. Each minute felt like an hour, and just as I was starting to lose hope that I would hear from him again, my phone buzzed. It was another message from him. This time his words were a little longer, but they left me with even more questions. I've been to the doctor. They say it's serious, Selena. It's not something I wanted to share with you, but I can't keep hiding it. I've been diagnosed with an illness, something that's going to take time for me to get through. I'm not sure what the future holds, and I don't know how to explain it all right now. But I want you to know that I'm doing everything I can to get better. I just needed some time to process it all before I could tell anyone. I could hardly breathe as I read his words. I wanted to scream, to ask him so many things, but I couldn't. All I could do was sit there, stunned. The idea that Lucas, the person I had been growing so close to, was facing something this overwhelming was like a punch to the gut. I didn't know how to react. My mind was racing, and all I could think about was how much I wanted to help him, how much I wanted to be there for him in whatever way he needed. I wasn't angry, not at all. But I couldn't help but feel this deep sadness, this overwhelming sorrow for him. How long had he been carrying this alone? How had he managed to hide it from me, from everyone? I didn't know what to say, but I knew I couldn't let him deal with this alone. So, I typed back, my fingers trembling as I tried to find the right words. Lucas, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I'm here. Whatever you need, I'm here. Please don't shut me out. You don't have to face this alone. It didn't take long for him to reply. His message came through, and though it was brief, I could feel the weight of his emotions behind it. Thank you, Selena. I'm scared, but I'm not ready to talk about it in detail. I promise I'll share more when I'm ready. Just, please be patient with me. I knew this wasn't going to be easy for him. It wasn't going to be easy for either of us. But I also knew that I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I couldn't let him go through this in silence, in isolation. He had already been carrying this burden on his own for too long, and now I wanted to be the person who helped him carry it, if only a little. The next few days were a blur. We texted back and forth occasionally, but the conversations felt different. The lightness, the casualness of our previous talks was gone. Instead, there was a quiet tension, an undercurrent of fear and uncertainty that we both tried to navigate. He told me little by little about what was going on, about his diagnosis, the treatments he was starting, and the fear he was facing. But he never gave me all the details, never explained exactly what kind of illness he was fighting. I could tell he wasn't ready, and I didn't push. There were moments, small moments, when he seemed a little more like his old self. He would send me a joke or ask about how I was doing. Those brief flashes of normalcy made me feel like there was still hope, like maybe, just maybe, he was going to be okay. But I knew deep down that this was going to be a long journey for both of us. I didn't know how long, or what challenges lay ahead, but I knew that I couldn't walk away. I couldn't turn my back on him now, not when he needed someone more than ever. I started visiting him, quietly at first, just sitting with him in silence, letting him know I was there. Sometimes he would talk, and other times he would just rest, exhausted from the treatments and the weight of everything he was going through. But I didn't mind. I didn't need to fill the silence with words. All I needed to do was be there, by his side. I began to see how brave he was in his own quiet way. How even when the fear was there, he kept fighting. He didn't let it define him, at least not entirely. He still laughed at the little things, still showed glimpses of the person I had gotten to know, and that gave me hope. As we spent more time together, I realized something. Illness isn't just about the physical toll it takes. It's also about the emotional and mental weight that can be even harder to bear. And for Lucas, that weight had been heavy, maybe heavier than I could ever fully understand. But I was determined to stand by him, to help him through whatever came next, and to show him that he didn't have to face this battle alone. Chapter 7. Love and Strength. If I'm being honest, I never expected that love could come wrapped in something like this. It's strange how life works, how it throws challenges at you when you least expect them. But what I've come to realize is that sometimes the hardest moments in life reveal the strength we didn't know we had. And love, true love, doesn't always look the way we expect it to. It's not always about the happy moments, the easy moments, the ones that are full of laughter and joy. Sometimes it's about showing up for each other when things get tough, when you're not sure what the next step is, but you take it anyway because the other person is worth it. And that's exactly how things had started to feel between Lucas and me. What began as a quiet, simple connection had turned into something much more profound, something deeper, something that didn't need words to explain. It was in the little moments, the way we looked at each other when there were no words to say, the way our silence was comfortable even when we were both going through something difficult. Lucas had been through so much in the past few weeks, more than anyone should have to face. The treatments, the uncertainty, the fear of the future, it was a lot for him to carry. And I saw that. I saw the toll it took on him, not just physically, but emotionally. There were days when he seemed so exhausted, so drained from the weight of everything he was going through, that I wasn't sure how he was even holding himself together. But despite all of that, Lucas was still the same person. In his own quiet way, he was still strong. There were moments when he would smile or make a joke, and I would see that light in his eyes again, the one that made me fall for him in the first place. And in those moments, I realized that love isn't just about the good times. It's about the hard times, the messy times, the times when everything feels like it's falling apart. It's about sticking around, holding on to each other, even when it seems like the world is spinning in a direction you didn't plan for. I remember one particular afternoon. It had been a rough week for Lucas. His treatments had left him feeling more drained than usual, and the uncertainty of it all seemed to weigh heavily on him. I could tell he was trying to put on a brave face, but it wasn't hard to see through it. The tiredness in his eyes, the way he moved slower than he used to, it was all there, and yet, even in that moment, when everything seemed uncertain, there was this quiet strength in him. We were sitting together in his living room, the afternoon sunlight filtering through the window, casting a soft glow across the room. Lucas was sitting on the couch, resting, and I was sitting beside him, quietly. Neither of us spoke for a while. It wasn't an uncomfortable silence, just one of those peaceful moments when you don't need to say anything to know that you're there for each other. I watched him, and for the first time I really saw it. The way he was carrying everything with such grace. Even when it was hard, even when he was scared, he was still here, still fighting. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of just sitting there, Lucas broke the silence. "You know, I'm scared, Selena," he said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. "I try not to show it, but there are days when I just don't know if I can keep going." His words hit me like a wave, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. I wasn't sure what he needed to hear. What could I say to make it better? But then I realized something. Sometimes you don't need to fix everything. Sometimes just being there is enough. "I know," I said softly. "I know you're scared. And I can't pretend to know exactly what you're going through. But I can tell you this, you don't have to face it alone. I'm here, and I'll be here, no matter what." He looked at me, his expression softening. "I didn't want to drag you into this," he admitted quietly. "I didn't want to make you go through this with me. I didn't want you to see me like this." But I shook my head, gently reaching out to take his hand. "Lucas, you don't have to hide from me. You don't have to carry this on your own. That's what love is. It's about showing up, even when it's hard, even when it's messy. And right now, you're not just carrying this alone. I'm right here with you." He squeezed my hand, and for a brief moment, I saw that light in his eyes again. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Enough to remind me that even in the hardest moments, there was still hope. There was still love. And as long as we had each other, we would face whatever came next together. In the weeks that followed, Lucas's health continued to fluctuate. Some days were better than others, and some days felt like the weight of everything was too much to bear. But no matter how difficult things got, we never stopped showing up for each other. We would sit together in silence or talk for hours about everything and nothing. Sometimes we would laugh at the silliest things, and other times we would sit in quiet solidarity, both of us knowing that there was so much more to say, but not needing to say it. Through it all, I realized that love isn't something that fades. In tough times, if anything, it grows. It strengthens. It becomes something that can withstand the storm. And in those moments when I thought I couldn't go any further, when I thought the weight of it all was too much for me to carry, Lucas would look at me and somehow, in his quiet way, he would remind me that we were stronger together, that no matter how hard it got, we could face it, we could fight through it, and that, in itself, was a kind of strength. The kind of strength that comes not from doing everything perfectly, not from being invincible, but from showing up, from loving each other through the hard times, from fighting together even when the odds were against us. It wasn't just about holding on. It was about holding each other, about standing together, even when everything around us seemed uncertain. And in that, I found a strength I didn't know I had, a strength I found in Lucas, and a strength I found in us. Because love, in its truest form, isn't just about what you get. It's about what you give. And in the hardest moments, that's when you realize just how much you're capable of giving. How much you're willing to fight for the person you love. And for me, that meant standing by Lucas every step of the way, no matter what the future held. Chapter 8. An Adventure Together. After everything we had been through, I never expected Lucas to want to go anywhere, especially not anywhere far away. But life has a way of surprising you, of showing you that even in the darkest of times there are moments of light, moments when you realize that there is still so much to be experienced. It was a cool evening, the sky painted in shades of soft orange as the sun began to set. I was sitting beside Lucas on the couch, the silence between us comfortable, but still tinged with the heaviness of everything he was going through. I had noticed that his health had been up and down lately. Some days he seemed like his old self, laughing at small things, joking about life. But there were other days when he was just so tired, when the exhaustion of his illness seemed to consume him. But on that evening, as we sat together in the quiet of his apartment, he suddenly turned to me with a look I hadn't seen before, determined yet gentle. There was something in his eyes, a kind of longing I hadn't expected, and it made my heart flutter nervously. He had been quieter than usual, but this was different. He had something on his mind. I could feel it. "I want to go on an adventure," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Just one last adventure." His words hit me like a thunderclap, catching me off guard. An adventure? We hadn't talked about anything like that. The thought of traveling, of leaving everything behind, seemed so far removed from the world we were living in right now. But I could see the sincerity in his eyes, and suddenly I understood. Lucas had always been someone who appreciated the little things in life, the quiet moments, the simple joys. But somewhere along the way, the illness had taken so much of that away from him. He had been trapped in a world of doctors, hospitals, treatments, and fear of the unknown. And now, he wanted to do something. He wanted to break free from all of it, even if just for a moment. He wanted to experience something new, something beautiful. "I want to go to the mountains," he continued, his voice steady now. "I want to see the stars, away from the city lights. I want to remember what it feels like to be alive." There was a pause, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. It was a simple request, yet it held so much weight. I knew what this meant to him. I could feel it in the way he spoke, in the way his hands clenched around the armrest as he made the suggestion. This wasn't just about seeing new places. This was about reclaiming a part of himself, a part of his life that he thought he might have lost forever. I could see that spark in his eyes again, the same spark I had seen in the beginning when we first met. The desire to live, to experience life, even in the midst of everything that was happening. It was beautiful. And it broke my heart at the same time. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. He wasn't fully healthy. The journey would be difficult, and I couldn't pretend it wouldn't be. But in that moment, I realized something important. We couldn't let fear stop us. Not now. Not when this was his chance to feel alive again, to feel the freedom that came with the open road, the fresh air, and the vastness of the mountains. "Let's go," I said, my voice full of determination. There was no hesitation in me. There was no fear. I wanted this for him. I wanted him to have that adventure, to have that freedom, no matter how hard it would be. The next few days were a whirlwind of packing, preparing, and planning. We didn't need much: a small bag with some snacks, warm clothes, and a blanket to keep us cozy during the nights. The plan was simple: drive to the mountains, find a quiet spot to set up camp, and spend a few days away from everything. Away from the doctors, the hospital visits, and the endless thoughts of what the future might hold. It was a chance for both of us to breathe, to reconnect with the world outside, to find some peace in the chaos. When the day finally came, the weather was perfect. The sun was shining, and there was a light breeze in the air. We loaded up the car with the few things we needed, and as we drove away from the city, I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. It was just us, on the road, with no plan other than to enjoy the moment. I could see Lucas's face light up as we left the city behind, and I knew this was exactly what he needed. The further we drove, the more I saw him relax, the more I saw the person I had fallen for, the person who was so full of life and hope despite everything he had been through. The drive was long, but we didn't mind. We talked about everything and nothing, shared stories, and laughed at the most random things. And even though I could tell he was tired, I could also see that he was happier than he had been in weeks. There was something about being out there, in nature, that seemed to recharge him, to make him feel alive again. Finally, we reached the mountains. It was even more beautiful than I had imagined. The towering peaks loomed above us, the air was crisp and fresh, and the sounds of nature filled the air. We found a quiet spot near a lake, surrounded by tall trees, and set up camp. The peace was overwhelming. It was like we had stepped into a different world, one that didn't have the noise of hospitals or the weight of fear. It was just us, the sky, and the endless possibility of what was to come. That night, we sat by the campfire, wrapped in blankets, watching the stars appear one by one in the dark sky above. It felt magical, the kind of magic that only nature can provide. Lucas leaned his head against my shoulder, and for a moment, I felt like everything was perfect. We didn't need anything else. We didn't need to talk. We didn't need to worry about the future. In that moment, we were just two people sitting under the stars, breathing in the night air, and feeling free. "This is what I needed," Lucas whispered, his voice soft. This is what I've been missing." I smiled, my heart swelling with emotion. "I'm glad we did this," I said, squeezing his hand. "I'm glad we took this time." The next few days were filled with simple joys: hiking, exploring, watching the sun rise and set, and just being present with each other. There were times when Lucas would slow down, tired from the journey, but I could tell that every step, every moment in those mountains was giving him something he had lost. It wasn't just about seeing new places. It was about rediscovering a part of himself that had been buried beneath illness and fear. And for me, it was a reminder of what truly mattered. It wasn't the big things, the grand gestures, or the future we couldn't predict. It was the little moments, the ones you can't plan, the ones you can't control. It was the laughter, the quiet conversations, the shared silences under the stars. That adventure, the one Lucas had dreamed of, became more than just a trip to the mountains. It became a symbol of strength and hope. It reminded us both that even in the face of uncertainty, there is beauty, there is life, and there is love. And as long as we had that, we could face anything. Chapter 9. Letting Go. It's strange how life has a way of forcing you to face things you're not ready to face. You think you have more time, that things will work themselves out, that you can hold on just a little longer. But sometimes, the world doesn't give you that choice. Sometimes you're forced to confront reality, to let go of the things and people you've come to depend on. And no matter how hard you try to hold on, you realize that letting go is the only way forward. That was the lesson I learned during the weeks that followed our trip to the mountains. Lucas had been stronger than I had seen him in a long time. The trip had brought him a kind of peace, a sense of freedom he hadn't known in months. But even as the days went by, and he seemed to be getting a little better, I could see the toll his illness had taken on him. He wasn't getting any better, not really. He was still fighting, still holding on, but the truth was becoming harder to ignore. His strength was beginning to fade. One evening, as we sat together in his living room, there was a stillness between us, a quiet that felt heavy. The weight of the unspoken truth hung in the air. We had both known for a while that his battle with illness wasn't one that could be won with hope alone. It wasn't something that could be fixed by going on adventures or by holding on to the memories of better days. I had watched him fight so hard, and I had been with him every step of the way, but I knew deep down that we were reaching the end of this chapter. And as much as I wanted to deny it, as much as I wanted to keep pretending that there was more time, I couldn't. Neither of us could. It was Lucas who spoke first, breaking the silence in his soft, hesitant way. "Selena," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't think I can keep doing this much longer." I felt my heart stop for a moment. I had been waiting for this moment, but I wasn't prepared for it. The words, though I had been expecting them, hit me like a wave, and I suddenly felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to say something, to reassure him, to tell him that we could fight this, that we could keep going. But I couldn't. There were no words that would make this better. No words that could change the reality of what was happening. "Lucas, don't say that," I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to stay strong. "You're stronger than this. You fought so hard. You can't just give up now." He smiled softly, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was a weariness in him, a kind of surrender that I hadn't seen before. It was as if, after everything he had been through, he had finally come to terms with what was inevitable. "I'm not giving up, Selena. I've never given up," he said, his voice barely a breath. But I can't keep pretending that I'm going to get better. I've done everything I can. And I don't want to drag you through this anymore. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, but I wiped it away quickly, not wanting him to see my fear, not wanting him to see how much I was hurting. But the truth was, the thought of losing him, of having to say goodbye, was more than I could bear. It wasn't just about him being sick. It was about everything he meant to me. It was about how much I loved him, how much I still wanted to be with him, and how I couldn't imagine a life without him. I'm not going anywhere, I said, trying to steady my voice. I'm here. I'm always going to be here, Lucas. You don't have to do this alone. He took my hand, his grip weak but still firm. He looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something that I hadn't seen in a while. Peace. It wasn't the peace of someone who had given up. It was the peace of someone who had accepted what was to come. It was the peace of someone who had made their peace with the inevitable. I know you're here, he whispered, and that's why this is so hard. You've been everything to me, and I don't want to leave you with this kind of pain. I don't want you to feel like you have to carry this on your own. I don't mind carrying it, I said, squeezing his hand tighter. I would carry it for you forever if I could, but you don't have to go through this alone, not while I'm here. For a long while, we sat there in silence, neither of us knowing what to say next. But in that silence, there was an understanding between us, a deep, unspoken bond. We both knew that this wasn't something that could be fixed with words. It wasn't something that could be changed. But it was something we had to face, together, as I. The days went by. I saw Lucas becoming weaker. He was still trying to hold on, still trying to fight, but his body was giving out. His energy was gone, and the treatments weren't helping anymore. And though I stayed with him, holding his hand, helping him through the worst of it, I knew that the time was coming. The time when I would have to let go. It was the hardest thing I had ever faced, knowing that the person I loved more than anything in the world was slipping away. But I also knew that the love we had shared, the memories we had created together, would never fade. It would live on in my heart in the way I carried him with me, even after he was gone. And one night, as I sat beside his bed, watching him sleep, I realized something. Letting go wasn't about forgetting him. It wasn't about erasing the love we had. Letting go was about accepting that life, for all its beauty, is fleeting. It's about understanding that sometimes, no matter how much we wish we could change things, we have to let go to honor the person we love. When the time came, I held Lucas's hand one last time, whispering in his ear that I loved him, that he had meant everything to me. And as he took his final breath, I knew that, in some strange way, he would always be with me. His spirit, his love, would live on in my heart forever. Letting go didn't mean that the love we shared was over. It just meant that I had to carry that love in a different way. And though it hurt more than anything I had ever felt, I knew I would find a way to keep him with me, in the quiet moments, in the stars, in the memories that would never fade. Chapter 10. Living On. It's strange, the way time passes after someone you love is gone. In the beginning, it feels like the world has stopped, like everything that once mattered has suddenly lost its meaning. There's a deep, aching silence, where there used to be laughter, where there used to be warmth. You don't know how to keep going when your heart feels like it's been shattered into a million pieces, and the person who held it together is no longer there to fix it. I remember those first few days after Lucas was gone. The house was quieter, emptier, even though it had always been just the two of us. His absence wasn't just physical. It was like a part of me had been taken away with him. There were no more quiet evenings together, no more shared glances, no more of those moments that made life feel like it was moving forward. It was like I was suspended in time, caught between the world that used to be and the one I now had to learn to navigate alone. The first time I woke up after he passed, I felt disoriented, unsure of what to do with myself. For a moment, I almost expected him to be there beside me, his soft breathing filling the space. But then the reality hit again, like a wave crashing over me, reminding me that he was gone. And with that reality came the overwhelming grief, the heavy sadness that weighed on me, the kind of sadness that seemed to consume everything. But as much as it hurt, I couldn't stay in that space forever. I had to move. I had to keep living, even if it didn't feel like I had the strength to. I remembered something Lucas had said to me during our time together, something he had said not long before he passed. "Don't stop living, Selena," he had whispered to me one night, his voice weak but full of conviction. "Don't stop living just because I'm not there. Live for both of us." Those words echoed in my mind every day after he was gone. And at first, it felt impossible. How could I keep living when it felt like my heart had been torn apart? How could I move forward when every part of me wanted to stay stuck? To stay in the past with him, to keep reliving the memories of the love we had shared. But I knew, deep down, that Lucas had been right. He had fought so hard to live, to make the most of every moment, even when he knew the end was coming. And if he could do that, then I owed it to him and to myself to keep going. So I started small. I went for walks, just to feel the sun on my face, just to remind myself that the world was still moving, that life was still happening, even without him by my side. I spent time with the people who cared about me, the friends and family who had supported me through everything. They gave me the strength I didn't know I had, and little by little, I started to heal. There were days when I felt like I was suffocating in the grief, when the sadness threatened to swallow me whole. But then I would remember Lucas, remember how he had never let fear stop him from living. Remember how he had faced every day with a quiet strength, even when he was at his weakest. And slowly I started to pull myself out of that darkness. As time passed, I began to find joy in the little things again. I started going to the places Lucas and I had talked about visiting. I went to the beach, the place where we had always dreamed of spending an afternoon together. And I sat on the sand, watching the waves roll in, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't the same without him, but it was still beautiful. It was still life. I found myself laughing again, genuinely laughing, not because I was trying to force it, but because I realized that life still had moments worth celebrating. There was still beauty in the world. I realized that Lucas had taught me something important during our time together, that life doesn't wait for you to be ready. It doesn't wait for you to heal or for everything to fall into place. Life keeps moving, and you have to move with it. I also began to write. I'd always loved writing, but after Lucas passed, I found that it became a way for me to channel my feelings, to give shape to the grief that sometimes felt too overwhelming to put into words. I wrote about our adventures, our moments together, the way he made me feel when he smiled at me or held my hand. And in those words, I found a way to keep him with me, even after he was gone. One evening, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I opened the notebook I had filled with memories and stories. As I read through them, a sense of calm washed over me. I realized that as long as I held on to the love we had shared, as long as I carried his spirit in my heart, he would never truly be gone. He would live on in the stories, in the memories, in the way I saw the world through the lens of everything he had taught me. I also realized that it wasn't just about carrying the pain of losing him. It was about carrying the love. Love doesn't disappear when someone leaves. It doesn't fade away, no matter how much time passes. Love remains, and it transforms. It becomes something different, something that stays with you, something that becomes a part of you. I started to live for both of us, just as Lucas had asked. I started to embrace life in all its messy, beautiful, unpredictable glory. There were still hard days, days when the grief felt too much to bear, but there were also days filled with laughter, with love, and with the kind of joy that made me believe in the possibility of tomorrow. I would never forget him. I would never stop loving him. But I had learned that letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant learning to carry on, to move forward, to keep living in honor of the love we shared. And with each passing day, I felt a little bit stronger. I felt like I was living again. Not just for me, but for both of us. And I knew, somewhere deep inside, that Lucas would always be with me, in the stars, in the wind, in the moments when I found myself laughing or smiling at something small and beautiful. He was there. And that was enough. Life had become a journey, not one I had planned for or expected, but one that I had to take. And with every step I took, I felt Lucas beside me, reminding me that love never truly dies. It lives on, in the hearts of those who carry it, shining brightly like the stars above. Great work today! Every moment you spend practicing brings you closer to mastering your English listening and speaking skills. Remember, progress comes with patience and consistency. If this story inspired you or helped you in your learning journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Easy English Spark channel for more lessons and stories. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in your growth. I'll see you in the next video. Take care and keep shining.